a psychotherapist with a passion for guiding individuals through transformative a psychotherapist with a passion for guiding individuals through transformative journeys, specializing in women's issues, ethical non-monogamy, creative professionals, and fellow therapists. Our very welcome guest today is Melissa Klass. She blends deep empathy with a dynamic, trauma-informed approach. Melissa helps clients navigate complex relationships, heal from past wounds, and uncover their authentic selves. With a background that bridges the beauty industry and mental health, Melissa brings a unique perspective to her work, understanding the intersection of creativity, identity, and emotional wellness. She served as adjunct faculty at Pepperdine and Antioch universities, mentors upcoming clinicians as a clinical supervisor, and contributes to systemic change through her work on the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Melissa's mission is to create safe, collaborative spaces for growth, whether it's in the therapy room, in her teaching, or hopefully in conversations like the one we're going to have today. So there's a huge amount I want to ask. So Melissa, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I think my first question has to be to ask you to take a little step back and tell us a little bit about the person you were growing up and what helped create the person that's joining us here today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a great question, right? I did reflect on how to synthesize this down. And I can say I did grow up in a home with mental illness and addiction. And growing up in that sort of space is a different experience, right? Everybody normalizes their own childhood, whatever is going on in your home. You make the childhood assumption that it's going on in other people's homes too, right? But perhaps it was not. And I was very young. I was maybe 12 years old when I recall thinking to myself, like, okay, this is not a life I want. Like, I need to follow a different path. Like, mom doesn't seem so happy. Dad's not so happy. They're not happy together. This is not a reality that I want to embrace for my life. So I was pretty young when I realized that. And then, as I'm sort of figuring things out in my life, I, finished high school. I went to college. I actually then went to cosmetology school. Because I was like, I'm not ready. I actually thought I was going to go to law school, but I thought, no, I'm not quite ready to dive in. And I thought about what I wanted out of my career, which at that point, and then for that period of my life through my 20s, I wanted like a flexible schedule. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to work with, cool creative people, theater people. I worked with a lot of queer folks. Like, I just figured out who I wanted to be around. And I was like, that's the beauty industry. I'm going to do that. So I finished my undergrad. I got my cosmetology license. Worked at that all through my 20s. And then around 30 is when I did go back to school. But of course, I've changed gears, right? And gone into becoming a psychotherapist. So you study psychology, and then you take the long, long road to California licensure, which is an intense bar. And alongside that, in my 30s, I did an epic ton of therapy, just so much therapy. And it was wonderful. And so I think that's more or less how I got to be here today.
And do you think you're in the right place now?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. I love what I do, and I love the variability of the job. I love working with clients. I love mentoring. I love having conversations like this and opportunities, or writing or speaking. I mean, I really enjoy the diversity that I'm able to have and every part of it, but in particular, the people, in particular, working with clients and supervising.
Yeah. So that's a good link, actually. So when people first come to you, first of all, it's often what's the word, brave? I think it is a brave decision to go and reach out to somebody, to talk to somebody you don't perhaps know. But I think your passion obviously is to guide people through on their journeys, and that suggests that people come to you and you come across complex, challenging situations. What is it that brings people to your door, and what do they expect from the relationship they're going to have with you?
Yeah, sure. That is a perfect lead in, right? So I think as far as, bringing people to the door, right, it is all these various things. So it's referrals from prior clients. It's referrals from colleagues. It's somebody read an article that I published, or, snagged a quote that I wrote and was like, oh, that's interesting. Or an intern has someone that they need to get placed and they think of me. So it's various avenues where people come in. But as far as what they expect, I think at the outset, right, if you're pursuing therapy, you expect / hope that you're going to experience relief. I think that is first and foremost, right, on everybody's mind, is they want to feel better. And I also think that, they're coming through my door through all those various channels because I've said something that they connected with, right? So they've read, heard, seen, whatever it was, they've connected, they want relief, they come to my door. And now they're really hoping for that containment and that safety, and to find, for a lot of my clients, to find someone to work with that they don't need to educate, someone that is safe, but also understands, right? They don't need to pay me a whole bunch of money to explain their lifestyle, for example, if they're like in the non-monogamy communities, right? They come in and they think, oh, good, somebody that gets it already, that can also provide this space and this containment, and that can then take the journey with them, right? They're kind of looking for a partner to take that journey, I think, in some ways too.
That's really interesting. I had therapy. I started therapy last year, and my mum passed away, and I was sort of struggling with that and lots of other things. And it's I chose a therapist because of locations, which one was closest to me. It isn't necessarily
Oh,
the best way to pick them. And I hadn't actually thought of it. I don't know why, but when you said there about you don't want just to pay the money to explain and to bring the person into your experience, your life, your way of thinking, way of feeling, whatever. And I think that's really interesting the way you put that, is that they can sort of take that as a given with you, and then they can get on with talking about what the things are. Because ultimately, I found therapy was a good, safe place to talk. Whether it would have been different with somebody more attuned to me and stuff, I don't know. But I do think there's a huge amount to be gained from going to the person that actually understands in a non-judgmental way the life you're living. I think that's, yeah. I hadn't thought of that. So that was a really really interesting way of putting it.
yeah. And I think, I mean, somebody's own unique experiences around a particular lifestyle, for example, that's going to be right. There's as many people on the planet, there's going to be versions of that, right? But to understand the
Yeah.
tenets of like how their relationships work, or like working with the creative industry, right? I'm in LA. I've worked with people at everything, whether they're writing a script or starring in the major film, right? All of these different things, but I have a pretty strong grasp of what happens in the entertainment industry, right? So when they come in, they don't have to explain like all the anxieties that go with this part, or the
Yeah.
waiting game here, or when the work's going to come. Like they assume I know all of that because I've got experience with that. And then we just dive into them. So I do think it saves time with some like non-monogamy community the most, I think, but other
Mm.
communities as well.
One of the phrases I used in my introduction was something you talk about, sort of uncovering your authentic self.
Mm.
And I've never been sure about what the phrase actually means. When do I know that I am being my authentic self? Is it a feeling? How would you define that?
Well, it's probably an evolution more than a
Okay.
feeling. I mean, to define it, I would say, your authentic self is who you are without fear, without shame, and kind of just in the light of your own love of yourself, or your own self love, right? Like it's just who you are. And I think over the course of our lifetimes, all these different, ideas get into our head, right? Whether they're familial, cultural, societal, our friends' opinion, and we start to veer away from who we are. But if we can kind of break down all of those parts, right? A lot of times when I'm working with clients around things like this, right? I'll ask something like, well, whose voice is that?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
it's your mom's, right? And that's what you've been
Yeah.
told for 30 years. But in fact, you don't actually agree with that. And I think, to get down to one's authentic self, there are parts, right? There are cultural constraints too. I mean, if you want to run around naked all the time, you cannot. That is a social construct that we more or less
Even in
have.
California? Mhm.
Even in California, well,
Wow.
parts of California sometimes, but I think that's been repealed. But generally speaking, not advisable. And that's in the context of living in a larger society. And I think that we can make appropriate choices based on context and still be authentic, right? But we know that that is maybe not the best way to express ourselves. And, behind closed doors, you can be naked all the time, but to move through the world and to sort of adapt, right? Do that dance of
Yeah.
yourself and what the cultural demands, while also being in tune with what's truly yours.
It's there's still a sort of sadness within our culture that there is still a huge amount of pressure put on women to be everything to everybody all at once, and a lot of a lot of thoughts about well-being are sort of put to one side, and I just wonder whether things are getting better and we are seeing more equality and more understanding, or do we still have a long, long way to go?
I think we still have a long, long way to go. Um, I think there's a lot of unconscious cultural beliefs that persist, right?
Mm.
And so I think on the surface, we're saying yes, gender roles are shifting, and yes, there's more equality, and I think in some places and in some families that's of course true. But I also know in my work, I'll still hear things like, well, she can leave her kids with the dad, can leave her kids with the dad. I'm air quoting here. I know we can't be seen, but the idea that dad is capable of babysitting is amazing is wild to me. Or,
Yeah.
if you have a mom that changes one diaper every 3 months, she is shamed, and mom shame is real. You have a dad who knows how to change a diaper and did one last year. You are so lucky. You have the best guy, right? And so these sort of narratives do really persist. And I'll see a lot of contrast. There's now studies showing, right, things are balancing out in sort of the workforce and economically, but I don't know that they're balancing in the home in addition. And so there is that mental load of the home, right? So mom might, she's going to work because you need that 2 income household. She's, now being a stellar boss or employee, whatever she's doing there, and a stellar mom, wanting kids, career trajectory is off because she had to take time off and dad maybe didn't have to, or maybe we're lucky and got to, but
Yeah.
it's just a very different thing. And then she becomes the CEO of her home as well. And because somebody has to do that mental load, right? Somebody needs to remember that little Bobby needs to get to the dentist and figure out who's going to take him and get that on the books, and don't forget the toilet paper. And she could, in theory, distribute some of those tasks, but the culture still kind of tells her that she should be able to handle it, right? And that is just, I mean, that still reflects, I think, the disparity in the gender roles in families.
Yeah, it's looking back on it now, it's quite amusing, I guess. But I didn't sort of grow up around a lot of kids. I didn't have nephews, nieces. So when we had our children, they were really the first children I knew, really. And I remember my wife going away for a week for work. She went to China
Mhm.
for a week
Yeah.
when our daughter was 9 months old. She just got back to work and she went away on this trip. And we had, like most people, you have the sort of the parents group. All of you have children at the same time. You get on with each other and talk and stuff. And we were sort of talking to them. Since Justine was saying, "Oh, I'm going away next week for a week to sort of China," and some of the mums in the group, not the dads, some of the mums, but what about the baby? It was like I was looking around like, okay, and it was extraordinary. And one of I couldn't I would be uncomfortable leaving the baby for a night with my husband, or something. But it just is it really that unshared? And yes, I couldn't breastfeed and stuff, but Justine could express and I could do all those things, and it was yeah, I guess we just didn't think about it, but the response in the group was but what about the baby? It was like you're going to hire a nanny for the week, or you're going to no, I'll look after Madeline. It's okay. She's 17 now, so she didn't come to any harm. But it's weird. It's just weird, isn't it? There's still expectation, and I think we found sort of sadly during COVID when we had certainly in the UK and I know lots of parts of America, we had our children were at home for sort of 9 months a year, I guess, and so they're being taught at home, and all the research showed that it was the mums that were doing their job from home and educating the children from home and doing all of the other home tasks when the dad or the husband or the partner was here as well. I was here as well, and many were, but it did massively fall to the wife, to the mother to sort of pick up all of those things. Which, when you look at it on paper, when somebody that doesn't know our culture at all, an alien comes to Earth, that doesn't make sense. Well, why isn't it split more evenly? It,
Sure.
it's history, isn't it? It's what our mums did, our grandparents did, our great grandparents did, and it's. I, I guess we have to go through a few generations before that hopefully starts to wash out a little bit more.
I know. I think so. I mean, I'm thinking of some friends that I have that sort of did the cultural role reversal where he stayed home and raised the kids. And she is high level military. She's like up there. And she told me a story just recently. She said, we were talking about this topic, right, of kind of, men and women and raising families and all of this. And she said, I wasn't even the primary parent. And I felt it in the office all the time because there would be an occasion where my child would be sick and I would
Mm.
need to go get them. And it would be like, oh, well, she's a mom, she can't. Oh, she won't be able to stay past 5. And, all the men stayed till whenever they wanted, but it was always assumed that I would be unable or incapable in these ways because they knew that I was a mother. Even though I wasn't the primary parent, I still kind of had the repercussions of just simply being female and having given birth to them.
Yeah, hopefully it gets better. I mean, I just said we're very fortunate. We've got a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son, but both of them are fabulous. Madeline's just trying to choose what college to go to next year. And she wants to do philosophy, ethics, and religion. So she's doing psychology now actually for A levels, and she loves all of that. Why do we think certain things and all those sort of things? But back to the point. Sorry. So 17-year-old, 14-year-old, and I'm very aware that influences on them are very different than when I was. So when I was their age, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't social media, there wasn't smartphones, and so life was very much about regular television, and it was about going to the library, reading books, listening to other people, all those sort of things. But and I guess our relationships were formed through the knowledge we had from that relatively limited set of inputs. But how do you see life for younger people now? So what do relationships look like in the age where people can be connected 24/7 and when they're bombarded with messaging images from social media that may not be representative or truthful, but they're being bombarded nonetheless? How does life and relationships, how have they evolved in the age of social media and the internet?
Whew, I mean, yeah, this is a big one, and I think of it a little bit historically, right? Because, once upon a time, radio was brand new, and then
Yeah.
TV was brand new, right? And then the internet was brand new, and now social media is, brandish new, certainly new to us. We didn't have it as kids, right? And I think with each sort of leap in this kind of way, every prior generation thought that that would be the end of, the end of everything,
Yeah.
right? So, and with each new kind of invention, there was more access, more opinions, more other people coming into the home through these stories and narratives or whatever that started off, maybe more fictitious. TV is less, less real life and more fictitious, and then getting to the internet. Then there's the question of, well, that's a tangent, but teasing out what is truth and what is not truth and using critical thinking, but we will leave that on the table. And then the social media piece. And I think that in a lot of ways, it is a similar problem. It's been created by these. It's a loss of connection. It's a loss of interpersonal connection. And I think that the way to kind of address that maybe has been evolving. I mean, certainly at its core, it's that. Now really it's looking at, because I think social media, right, it divides a lot of people. It does connect some people, right? I mean, certainly you and I are on different continents. If we shared a social media page, you could see pictures of my puppy frolicking and I could see your daughter graduate, right? Like, so it's connective sort of in that way. But then I think it disconnects a lot of people because the intimacy that's created by that is kind of a false intimacy, right? It's, just because I've seen your daughter graduate, let's say, I could have not spoken to you in 5 years, but I feel connected to you and part of your life because I've witnessed this event with you. And so I think it really is that thread of just connection, interpersonal connection, and helping people now, I mean, in a practical way, like sort of form boundaries around what that could look like, figure out, how much social media should be, air quotes, in their lives, how much they would like to have in their lives is what I should say, what is appropriate for them, how to have boundaries around that. But generally speaking, like, does it feel good to me? Do I see a positive impact on young people? No, I can't say I've seen much positive. I mean, I'm speaking of it sort of generally, but what I actually see in the room is not good. I think I just heard on something recently, a study about kids that they spend more than 3 hours a day, teenagers, they spend more than 3 hours a day. I think maybe our Surgeon General was reporting this. The impacts of social media are damaging, and the average teenager spends 4.8. And so the epidemic of loneliness, certainly in the States, and I imagine in Western Europe where you are too, is correlated, right? I mean, I can't say that it isn't. So I see the through line, but I also see what's happening now.
Yeah, no, I want 100%. And I know, looking at Australia, they're just passing a law that bans all social media for under 16s. But how robust that law will be, and I don't know. But there is absolutely, you have that 4 or 5 hours a day on social media, and you just don't realize, I guess, you're just scrolling through things, and you just, yeah, the algorithms are very, very clever or very insidious, depending on how you look at it, and they take you to places that you spend time with other people that agree with you, and that whole confirmation bias and being in that sort of echo chamber, it just creates extremes, really, which we see in politics, in society, in everything. And that's, yeah, I do think that's dangerous. And it is interesting that a lot of the CEOs of the big social media firms don't let their children use social media. It's like somebody CEO of a drinks company. No, but I don't drink. It seems slightly incongruous, really. But and one of the things you touched on was intimacy, and I did just want to touch on one thing, which is about the ease of access that smartphones in particular have given young people, all of us really, to pornography. And I'm doing a special series early next year looking at the topic, and I've talked to some people in the industry. I've talked to a director, talked to a talent, they call it, an actress last week, a therapist, a partner of a porn addict, and it's really, really interesting, the role that it plays. And I think the reason it's interesting to people that are listening that haven't had life without a smartphone. So when you're growing up, when I was growing up, your access to pornography was you might sneak a look at your older brother or your dad's Playboy magazine, and that was pretty much it. It was a picture of a naked woman. You thought, oh my goodness, she's got no clothes on. Wow, and that was it. That literally was it.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I think the average age that boys encounter pornography online is 11, and which is long before they've really had a chance to understand what a relationship is. And a lot of the content online will suggest isn't necessarily representative of the relationships that lots of people have. So I just wonder what role you thought that ease of access to everything, what that creates in setting expectations, particularly between boys and girls and men and women, when they sort of expect something because they see it online. I think, well, that's a relationship, and it really isn't. And I wondered, I wonder what your professional thoughts were on that.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I actually have, I don't think you're aware of this because I don't know how you would know this, but I actually have a history working with sex addicts, porn
Okay.
addicts, betrayed partners. So I don't do that work as much anymore, but I
Mhm.
used to for a handful of years. And, I think that I think the Playboy, that is what kids used to see, right? Or maybe you would ask an older brother, like, hey, how do you do this? And then you would believe that to be truth. And that's what you executed,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what you would do.
Yeah.
And I think now, with the wide availability, I mean, certainly in my space, I more see parents coming in concerned, parents knowing that number, that kids tend to see this around 11, that they're, wanting to know how to talk about it, those sorts of things. So
Mhm.
the one silver lining, I guess I could say, is this could create an opportunity for sort of authentic conversations with one's kids in preparation. That said, I think what I generally see also, certainly with, adult clients, is that sometimes they'll report, a sexual experience to me, and I can tell just from the way they tell the story that the partner has watched too much porn, that they've
Yeah.
consumed too much porn. And
Mhm.
I think that it really warps kind of, especially at that young age too, when you're seeing it, but even for older people, it can warp like the sexual connection, right? It can eliminate intimacy, actual care, actual connection, actual feelings related to the other person, and become
Mm.
sort of physical act. And commonly, the way women are portrayed in porn might be as though they're enjoying something that most women, in my experience, both in my practice and personal life, would not tolerate for one hot second. And I do think it's leading to this disconnection around sex. I think studies are showing now that, young people, at least in America, are having less and less sex than they ever have.
Yes.
Right. This to me, to my mind, this could be a through line to that, right? That if this is what young people are witnessing, and then as a woman, you're experiencing this, and you're the one that's maybe at risk for pregnancy, and maybe you're not having an orgasm because the orgasm gap is massive, even at older ages, not just for young people, that like, why is that something that women are going to continue to engage in? Right. So I think that it's really having a huge impact. And not for the better.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, we have it's laughable in a way. So there's sort of age restrictions. So you go into a website,
Mhm.
Pornhub or whatever,
Yeah.
and it says, "Are you over 18?" Yes. That's it.
Yep.
That's literally it. It's like going into a convenience store and you're going to buy a bottle of whiskey. Are you
Mhm.
over 18? Yes. Oh, well, there you are then.
Great.
What? You don't need to show any ID, nothing at all. And one of my girlfriends, she tends to date quite a bit younger,
Mhm.
and she said she noticed when with sort of 20-year-old guys in particular, there's much more expectation that she's going to love being choked or treated roughly, and she's like, "Where the hell did this come from? What are you doing?" It's like the first
Mhm.
time we've been together or whatever. You don't. Oh, I thought you like it, and that's the problem, isn't it? That we see something and it's repeated and repeated, and people are acting, but we don't necessarily tie the two together. And I don't know what could be done. I mean, it's such a huge multi-billion-dollar industry now. I think Pornhub gets 5.5 billion views a month, which is extraordinary. I mean, so it's a data game now. They've got the data of people, and that's what they're looking for. They're tracking the data. It's it's
Mhm.
it's really interesting. What one of the topics you address in your practice
Mhm.
is, I'm not trying to tie the two together, is ethical non-monogamy.
Mhm.
And I wondered, first of all, if you can explain the term to people,
Oh, sure.
and whether you believe monogamy is our natural state. Are we
Mm.
supposed to be? Is supposed to be the wrong word? Should
Mm.
we be monogamous? Is that
Mm.
our natural state, do you think?
Mm. Well, I mean, I can start by defining ethical
Yeah.
non-monogamy. So, I mean, really, ethical non-monogamy is a blanket term for any relationship that's sort of deviating from the kind of heteronormative ideas, right? So,
Mhm.
it could be anything from, and by the way, the ethical piece is we've communicated about it, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of non-ethical non-monogamy, that's AKA cheating. So,
Well, I'm going to say, it used to be called cheating, didn't it? Yes.
so
Well, I'm just being non-monogamous. Okay. Yes.
no. So ethical non-monogamy is having all those conversations. And
Hmm.
whether, it could be anything from an occasional hall pass to, polyamory, where I have multiple partners that are love
Yeah.
partners, partners that I live with, and everything in between, people that swing, people that go to parties. There's all sorts of versions of it. But it's really just that openness and that connection. And it's a deviation from the heteronormative male female
Mm.
monogamy kind of platform. As far as, I mean, not a biologist, but I don't know that human beings are supposed to or should be anything, frankly. I
Mm.
think that, in relationship and connection, it's about feeling special. It's about specialness. And I think that there are as many ways to feel special as there are people on the planet. And I think culturally, we've sort of assigned specialness to sexual monogamy, but you can have sexual monogamy and not feel special in the slightest. So I know
Absolutely.
lots of folks in non-monogamous relationships that feel much more special, much more seen, much happier than some of the folks that I might work with in just a heteronormative dynamic. So I think it's about specialness and connection.
It is. And I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago, and the phrases didn't come up in the same way, but looking back now, it does resonate. Because I mean, first of all, you think it is a or can be a challenge when we expect to get everything from one person, and I think sometimes, yeah, that ethical non-monogamy, monogamy, etc. It gets very quickly. It's about sex, isn't it? And I think I'm sure it is to some people, but I do think a lot of it is um, the notion that you're going to be able to get everything you want, expect, hope for from one person. And I'm not just talking about sex, whether it's the conversation or the dialogue or the intellect or whatever, the relationship. Because some people feel very uncomfortable in the notion that men and women can be friends, for goodness sake. But you
Mm-hmm.
can be surrounded by people of the opposite sex or the same sex and have very close relationships with them without them being sexual. So I do think there's a lot in that whole notion of not being afraid to have the conversation about, I love this particular thing. I know you're not necessarily that interested, so why don't I explore this particular creative element, acting, whatever it's going to be, with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that whole notion of a relationship being defined as one on one is. I'm sure my wife will hear this, but it it's not that sort of relationship. It is misguided in a way, because you are going to reach out to people that have different views, people love talking about, people are interested in your sport, people are interested in art, people are interested in this when somebody else isn't. And I
Yeah.
do think that's, it's really interesting how we sometimes expect that we'll get everything from one person. And sometimes I think putting that pressure on that one-on-one relationship must be one of the causes of relationships fracturing in a way that can't be resolved. Because you think, no, whatever, it's got to be this, got to get everything from that person, they've got to get everything from me. We've changed over the last 20 years, that we can't be together anymore.
Yes.
Rather than thinking, well, what are the things I'm looking for that I'm not getting here? Can I get them elsewhere? Can we talk about it? Those things. So I do think that, yeah. Sorry, I'm just sort of thinking out loud as you're saying that. I do think that dynamic in the relationships could be addressed much more fully through therapy in particular
Mhm.
to help save that relationship before it gets to a terminal end.
Absolutely. Yes.
This is ultimately a podcast about empathy, and everything you do is with empathy. From what I've read about you, your website, talking to you, it's obvious. And I just wonder what you thought the role of empathy is in life, and the role of empathy in healing, I guess. What role does empathy play?
Well, I mean, really, right, when we're empathetic with someone, we're not just seeing the kind of generic feeling that they might be having, we're seeing the nuance of their experience, right? So, in order to have empathy, it might be that, let's say, I'm trying to think of a good example, like an example where, let's say you're the stay-at-home parent, you're a dad, maybe you are of a different cultural background than your wife, and so I can understand, you tell me it's difficult to be a stay-at-home dad, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it, that's tough, it's tough to be a stay-at-home dad, cool. Well, tough's kind of generic, right? It almost shows like a crack in communication for me to just feel as though I understand you by understanding it's tough, because what I don't understand are the sacrifices that you personally made. Maybe you struggled with gender identity and roles around being a dad that stayed home. Maybe there was a cultural component that, there was an expectation that dads would never do that. And it's, super emasculating. And how could you let your wife put you in that position? And you're having these conversations with your family. You're seeing the side eye when you're the only dad doing drop off at school. You're having all these experiences that make you feel a whole bunch of different ways. So if I go ahead and stop and say, like, okay, so you're a stay-at-home dad. Yeah, that's non-traditional. That's got to be tough. You're not going to feel seen by that, right? And I think so, to help somebody really be seen, certainly, like if we use the partnership example or even in therapy, it's like, love someone enough to be curious about them. Because if you can be curious, then you're going to learn their truth, and that's going to allow them to feel seen, which will then allow them to feel loved, right? So even to circle back to our last question, that couple, if they could have some empathy for each other and dig in and really be curious about each other, they could maybe get back that love. Be curious about what's changed in the last 20 years instead of just saying, we're different, this must be over. So I think that's really it. It's just having that kind of space. And people don't feel seen and heard, I think, a lot in the day-to-day. People don't listen to one another, right? They talk over each other. If you're thinking about what you're going to say next, you're not actually listening. And so I think, like, certainly in the therapy space, to know that I'm listening, that I see them, that I understand their experience, and I'll keep going. Like, I might say, no, I'm still not, can you bring me in more? I'm not there yet. And I'll keep going until I'm like, oh, is this the experience? Yes, Melissa, you got it. Thank you. And I've had sessions, I had one a few weeks ago and I finished it and I thought, oh, that session was so tough. Like, what did I do there? Did I really, And the following week, the client said, I immediately felt better. The next 2 days, everything was different. I felt really seen. And I thought, huh. And I thought back to that session. It was so tough for me as the clinician, but I definitely got there. That's what you'd hope after every session, that a client would say that, right? And to hear that feedback from her that she felt seen, I was like, okay, I did something. I did something right that week. But that is how people, I think, heal, because you heal in relationship, but only if you feel seen in that relationship. Yeah.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about it very clinically, it sounds so simple, doesn't it? Well, just really listen to the person as well. Okay, but I talked to a fabulous lady a few months ago. She's a chaplain in the British Army. She's a chaplain in the bomb squad. The British Army. And I said to her, "But how? When you obviously experience traumatic events, when you sit with a family or sit with a soldier or something that's just gone through it, what do you say? What do you do?" And so, well, the first thing I do is to let them know that I'm listening and I'm holding space for them. And it's what you said, it's just recognizing for the person that there's somebody there that's really, really going to listen. And if they don't understand things, they're going to ask questions, but the questions are all about helping them better understand. And it is so rare. Exactly as you said, we sort of ask a question, we almost assume what the answers are going to be so we can get on to the next question. And we don't listen to the full gamut of what somebody's saying because we want to get there. Oh, well, they finished talking now, right? You don't. You just and you follow up straight away with another question. Where you think, well, you obviously didn't hear what I just said because it's so. And you see it in when you see news reporters, when you see interviews on television, you think they're just not listening to what the person's saying. You're just almost having two separate conversations. But I do think that whole listening, holding space, all of those things are really, skills we could get a lot better at. And maybe some of that's down to our ever shorter attention span. It's back to social media again, that we're used to seeing things so quickly that actually having a long form conversation feels quite difficult. There was an experiment a few months ago that had teenagers, older teenagers. They were in a room for like half an hour without their smartphone, just completely alone, sitting in around with their own thoughts. And on the table in front of them, there was a button that if they pressed the button, they got a small electric shock. So they pressed it once and sort of test it. Okay, well, that's not very nice. And they found that 84% of them pressed the button at least 2 more times during the half an hour to have some sort of stimuli, to have something outside, because they were so uncomfortable with their own thoughts. Because you don't tend to sit. You see someone in the bus, they're waiting at the dentist, at the doctor's, wherever, and they're on their phone at reception. They're not just sitting there for 15 minutes, just with their own thoughts. No, not meditating, just sitting there. And they said they found it so hard to sit there. They had to have something else that just broke which is extraordinary when you think about it. That whole, you can't sit with your own thoughts for half an hour. You'd rather give yourself a painful electric shock to feel something, to know that it's not just you're not just in your own head. I thought that was amazing. I think it was in Amsterdam, the study, but I just thought it was really interesting that so many of them needed that stimuli that they couldn't cope with their own thoughts. One of the things that I've always thought go together very well are, I think, kindness, respect, and empathy. And for some reason, I know that some people would see those words not necessarily strong words. They would see them as demonstrating perhaps a weakness. And I just wonder what your thoughts were.
Well, I think that goes down to one sort of moral and ethical kind of compass, or their values or guidelines, right? Because, I think that, like, for example, right, I could say, if I'm taking a walk in the morning with my dog and I see a person on the corner that, perhaps doesn't own a home, perhaps nobody smiled or been kind to that person all day. And I could take a minute and I could say good morning, and I could, have an exchange, or simply just say that and move on. And that might align with my values and feel kind and appropriate to me. But somebody else could think, well, what's the return on investment there? I mean, you took time out of your day and you weren't hustling, you weren't doing the next thing. And their values reflect that I wasted time, right? So I was weak. Kindness is just not something that's valued, right? So it is a foundational, I think, difference in, I don't want to say maybe ethics, values, morality to some extent, I think. I certainly consider them, like you, I think all is strength. It takes presence of mind and self-awareness to be able to tap into, making the choice to be kind or respectful or empathetic. But that reflects my value system. Not everybody agrees with that. That's what I value. So I think that's what it comes down to.
It's like if you're at a supermarket and someone's struggling with the bags and you help them put their bags into the car or whatever. So some people would look at that and think, well, you've just gone everywhere, you sort of wasted 2 or 3 minutes, help them put their bags in the car. But again, the research shows actually the person that's offering the help is getting a boost in their serotonin, all those positive energy. So you're not doing it for a reward, but intrinsically, just chemically, we are getting a reward by doing that thing. So I do think that whole notion of kindness without expectation of reward is such a... The world would be a better place if we were more kind to each other. And that sounds very sort of facile, but it just would, really. If we were just kind and we held doors open and we let people in traffic and we it's thrown down with rain, we give somebody a lift to the next bus stop or whatever. That isn't anything that's going to traumatically change our lives, but it is going to help somebody. And there can't be a bad thing in that, really.
Mm-mm. I agree.
One of the challenges that you're obviously very close to is the challenge that mental health costs bring to the economy. I think estimates show in the US that $280 billion a year is spent on mental health, or it costs the US economy that much money. So in a presidential term, that's about $1 trillion. And I just wonder sometimes whether we spend the money on the right things, whether we rush to antidepressants, to a sort of chemical solution, rather than conversations trying to get to the cause or the reasons. And I just wonder how we should, and it's probably a very unfair question, how should we address mental health more effectively?
I mean, it is a big question, right? I mean, yeah, not an economist and not a psychiatrist, so I don't know
Mhm.
what the laws are there, but so I'm a non-prescribing professional here.
Yep.
Um, so maybe a little bit out of my wheelhouse. Not something that I spend a ton of time thinking about, just because I think it is sort of out of my scope, right? I mean, I'm sort of in the, down to that very tiny, one-on-one conversation to
Mhm.
create change, right? And I sort of put my energy where I can help. Yeah, I don't even know if I can begin to imagine how to overhaul it. I mean, I see a lot of movement. There are some not so good things happening in the mental health world that are, maybe increasing access, but in ways that might have a negative impact on people if they have a really bad experience. But there are some good things and some, things that happen like in the community mental health level. I mean, this
Yeah.
could be a California thing, but like for me, when I was a trainee and earning my hours, me, like many, 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 many people, chose to work in a community mental health center.
Mhm.
I worked at Open Paths Counseling, which is now located in Inglewood, and it's a wonderful space. And those folks are really doing good work, and they're learning and growing, and they're getting hours from the experience, and they're having real in-person connections with people in a way that's affordable, right? Their prices are based
Yeah.
on what they make. And there's a lot of funding that comes into the center, whether it's donations or
Mhm.
other grants and things like this. I think more access to options like that, like for me, if I have some, a client come in, a referral come in, and it's not in a fee range that I can accept, I'm then looking to find what can you afford? What does that look
Yeah.
like? Let's go here. And I say, can you afford, which actually gives you a lot of information. Because in theory, I should probably be saying, what insurance do you have? But that's not particularly helpful.
Yeah.
That's not something that, mental health isn't really well supported by insurance, except for maybe the most affluent. They might have a
Mhm.
good plan that's going to give them half back or something. But I
Yeah.
think there is an access problem for even that people that want it, and a huge financial gap in maybe quality of care and affordability, which is really, really unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's very similar in the UK. I do think that sort of
Yeah.
that community health thing got sort of really pushed down. It was, oh no, we'll do things centrally, and it is now. We're trying to be built back up again
Mhm.
because there's so much around that community, the sort of therapy groups, the discussions, all those sort of things. And it goes back a little bit to what you were saying before about the loneliness thing. A huge amount of it is people just don't get to talk to other people.
Yes.
And whether it's self-scanning at the supermarket, it means you don't talk to the cashier anymore, or whatever it is. I
Mhm.
think people miss that sort of dialogue. So we are seeing a bit of a growth in groups to go and just talk with people. I think a lot of people feel that's quite therapeutic.
Mhm.
And what so you spend obviously a lot of time helping others or understanding others' relationships.
Mhm.
And he said something in the beginning about the power and the value of self love and self care, etc. And I wonder how that affects you. Do you find it easy to love yourself and be open to the love of others?
You know, yes, I would say that a lot of that's come through my own personal work and my own being in
Mhm.
therapy to kind of help me learn to be vulnerable and to have space to connect. But yeah, I think, through all of that work, I've definitely learned to love myself. And I think if you're able to do that, then you're able to accept the love of others too, right? Um, but yeah, I think, and even sometimes I'll notice like in my own work, I'll hear conversations that are tough, or I'll have a tough day, or I'll hear something that transpired in someone's life. And it can make me reflect on my life in a positive way or a negative way, but often positive, where I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I feel so fortunate to have that in place in my life, or I have that relationship and this person's really seeking it, or, that sort of thing. So it can have a positive impact in that way. But I would say, yeah, I'm definitely open to love. And yeah, I'm fortunate that I've done enough work to be there, I think.
So, how important are family and friends to you?
Well, I mean, connection is important, right? To kind of, that's one of our through lines today, I suppose. But
Yeah.
connection, whether it's family, friends, is incredibly important. I think that for me personally, sort of chosen family has become kind of, more a part of central to my life. I don't
Yeah.
think that blood is required. It's the quality of the relationship and the intimate connection that you have. I mean, I have a former partner now that, we were together in all through my 20s, and we're like best friends. I'm super close to his partner. I see his mom at least once a quarter. I'm going to see her in a couple weeks to spend the day. And, so I don't subscribe to any rules about what relationships ought to be, right? That I can't be friends with that person, or that,
Mm.
once that's done, then everything's cut off. I think they are my chosen family, and they feel the same about me, and the connection is really, I think it's really important. And I'll see it with clients too, by the way, that shift from like really relying on kind of family of origin or biological family to a chosen family.
Yeah.
Like I have a client who, when we met, it was sort of, in a heteronormative dynamic, did a bunch of work, became a trans man, kind of, maybe created a little distance with their family of origin, created community. And I remember when they reflected to me, wow, like I understand now this idea, right? I've heard this idea out in the world, and to be able to choose the people that have meaning, and, blood is not what's most important. And I feel so connected and seen and supportive, and they've created that for themselves. And I think that's beautiful. Like they landed exactly where they needed to.
I love that, and I absolutely love the notion of we create our own family at stages. Yes, we have if that's a blood family, and some people are closer than others, but I think yeah, being able to create that connection around you, and I always find it unusual that people that have been in long-term relationships and the relationships break down, and then that's it, they're completely split off from that. I still in touch with people that I dated, gosh, 25 years ago, and their parents, and just because otherwise you have that really great connection, and suddenly you've lost everything. Then it always seems a bit odd that you just lose everything. And as long as everybody in current relationships, etc., on all sides is comfortable with it, I think it's, yeah, why lose that friendship? It seems to be an odd thing to do. So where do you find your joy? What brings you happiness?
Mm. Well, I think connection, right? Not to lean on that too heavily, but certainly, yeah, relationships with friends and family. But I get a lot of joy out of learning. I'm a very, very curious person, which might feed my work very well, but I am naturally very curious. And I personally really value novelty. Like I like
Mhm.
newness. I like to travel. I like to meet new people and, have new conversations and connections. But I also like really enjoy reading. I enjoy wine tasting. I've studied wine quite a bit. That's so much fun for me. I have a little dog. He's like the best. He brings me joy for sure. So lots of things. Yeah.
It is. I'm fortunate to have a little dog as well, and we have a cat as well. But it's very, I think cats sort of tolerate you, and they're very much like, "What, do you want to stroke me? Okay." Whereas I can literally, and I'll open the door to this room in a minute, and I'll walk outside, and June will be, she'll, like, she hasn't seen me for a month. Just that overwhelming. In the morning, you go and get them, and it's that excitement that they have of seeing you. It's just that completely unfiltered, just love that they have for you. That they don't judge you. And this is the first dog I've ever had, and it's a fabulous thing. Got her during lockdown. It was, yeah. So yeah, I totally agree. It's a really special relationship.
Mhm.
And but one of the things I always wonder about, people that spend a lot of time listening to other people and working with them, and sometimes dealing with some very difficult challenges. You obviously put a lot of energy into that because people want your energy and want to sort of feel that you're with them. So how do you practice self care? How do you look after yourself to make sure you have those high energy levels?
Mm. It's a good question. I mean, boundaries, lots of
Mhm.
boundaries all over the place, professional and personal. Um, I manage my time pretty well. I know that might sound funny, but I think maybe it goes with boundaries, so I can accomplish a lot of things or not, but I make that choice. And it's
Yeah.
partly from structure that I will create, especially, if needed.
Mhm.
And sleep hygiene, I think, is another big one, which might sound funny, but like, kind of having good sleep hygiene, right? Which is just, I mean, that's behavioral stuff. Anybody can learn that. So that I'm well rested. And doing those things, I think, then allows me to create space in my life to relax or wine taste or walk that dog or spend time with the friends or do all of that. And I think too, I do have a heavy focus for me personally on, like, I do move every day or try to. I walk a lot. I do some form of exercise or yoga. I try to eat well. I'm a big believer in the intuitive eating model. I've done a lot of
Mhm.
work professionally around that as well. So I think, again, I create space for all of that stuff, right? It's because I have those boundaries and that structure that I can take the time to cook and meal prep for the week or take an extra walk. I mean, I walk a walk and probably an hour every morning, at least, maybe more, with Henry, the little dog. No phone, no podcast, no music, quiet, 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 quiet. Coffee, Henry. That's it. That's a luxury. I mean, I'm a busy
Yeah.
gal and I give myself an hour every day to do that. But the value, I mean, it's huge. It's just, you can't trade it. You can't trade it.
I can always tell if for some reason I can't go out first thing in the morning with Juno, our dog, and I go out later in the day, I feel so much different.
Uh-huh.
Just yeah, normally the children go off to school, my wife goes off to work, and I sort of go out for a walk with Juno. But if I've got early calls, early meetings, and I can't get out till lunchtime, it doesn't feel right really. No matter what it's a bit different in California, but no matter what the weather here, because my Gina doesn't mind whatever the weather is, snow, rain, wind, she'll happily go out for a walk, which is great. And I like you, I can sort of walk around for an hour, and yeah, you come back, and even though you haven't necessarily tried to or meant to or whatever thought about it, you've just come back more energized and
Yes.
just yeah, yeah. Normally, Gina comes back at the moment incredibly muddy and then sort of straight into the bath. But apart from that, it's a good experience really.
Mhm.
So if someone asks, "What's it like being you?" How do you answer? What is it like being you?
Oh, it's awesome. No, no, I think, I'm a very happy person.
Mhm.
I think I've created, a career and a life that I really love. My life is full of people that I really enjoy. I wouldn't say that, like, it's all sunshine and roses every day and I have no challenges and everything is, puppy dogs and ice cream or whatever. That's not the case. And I don't know that I even want that, right? I mean, I think without challenge at all, we would stagnate. So those things allow you to learn and grow and do and be, but generally speaking, yeah, I enjoy being me. And if there's something that I want to or need to change, I set about doing so. And I have my own therapy. I mean, I guess that's part of the answer to all of this, right? Through self-care and all of these things, therapy also.
Yeah.
So if I get off track or I'm needing additional support, I have a person that's there for me too. And I think that helps me kind of maintain, my availability and my life. But yeah, it's awesome. I wouldn't trade it.
Well, that's good. That's a perfect answer, isn't it? So what's next? What does the future hold?
Mm. Well, always something, right?
Mhm.
So, I'm always sort of, bringing up interns and getting them ready for licensure. That's ongoing always. But the newer things are I'm getting licensed in New York. So expanding my practice over there. So super excited about that. I am decided to do some work with the sort of shifting political landscape to support immigration. So I'm now doing psychological evaluations for visas, various types of visas. So expanding that part of my practice in California and again, also in New York once my licensure goes through. And then I don't know, hold me to this one. I have some great ideas. I want to write, I have the outline. I want to write about compromise and I've got a good outline. I'm hopefully in the spring, I'll really double down and start doing that, maybe releasing in excerpts. But some strong ideas about, the kind of role of compromise that compromise plays, how it shows up in these different arenas, whether it's, of course, gender, but even like what is the impact of, one's attachment style on how they compromise
Yeah.
as an adult, right? Or what value they derive from it, how it shows up in the workplace. How do you do it with your children? I think there's a misnomer culturally that compromise is 50-50. And I mightily disagree.
Yeah.
So I think that there's room here for some literature around this. So that's my bigger, longer term project, but it is it is in the works.
You don't like to get bored, do you?
No, I don't believe in boredom.
No. I like the fact you said, and I do the same actually. You sort of you schedule in time when you know nothing's going to get done. And I just, it's like, well, what do you do today? Well, I intentionally didn't do anything this afternoon.
Yeah.
I might have baked a cake. I might have gone off for another walk with the dog, whatever. But I intentionally, it's when you get to the end of the day and think, oh, I've done nothing today, and you didn't plan it to happen that way. But when you plan it, I think there's nothing more powerful than that. So you've got to schedule in that downtime as well as all the other things you're doing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, just want to say finally, just a huge thank you. I learned a lot. I was very open. I do envy your life in California at the moment with the darkness here and the brightness you got there. But yeah, thank you so much. It was very kind of you and very generous of you to spend so much time with us.
Yes, no, it was my pleasure. I was so happy to be here. I really enjoyed it.